specific adaptations to impose demands, right? SAID principle, SAID. And so our bodies really kind of form to the environment or the conditions that we put them through. So if we're driving through, I don't know, your favorite fast food joint over and over again, loading our bodies with high fatty foods, our body's going to get rid of it by storing it as atherosclerosis within our veins. So it kind of deals with those imposed demands in a way it can kind of manage. And we do that with movements as well. And we think about our environment in terms of our movements. For most of us, it's within our reach, what's right in front that we can easily see. Because our lives are really convenient. We're not having to, run and jump from, I don't know, the cougar behind us or the bear, or climbing up mountains and trying to reach. Our environment is really right here. So for me, 8 hours a day at least, I'm usually spent kind of spotting my clients, getting behind them, leaning forward and reaching for them. I'm always kind of within this realm. And for a lot of other people, Susan, sticking in needles in people, she's kind of here, right? Or Greg doing massage, I'm sure quite often he is in this position. And for a lot of us, seated, working at the computer, we're here, right? We're never usually here or up here or over. And so we kind of create these imbalances. Our bodies adapt to those environments to work right here. And so just as kind of Greg and Sarah had mentioned, our muscles in our chest, and especially our pec minor, starts rolling the shoulders forward. The muscles in the very top, lower occipital bones start extending the head a little bit. And so we start creating all these imbalances. And Sarah had a great little diagram in here that kind of leads to what I titled the upper cross syndrome on here, or that has been titled the upper cross syndrome. If you flip to her, I think it's the third page. Yeah, right here. Right behind the second piece of paper is that exact diagram of that upper cross syndrome. So you have those muscles that are short and tight in our chest, and those suboccipital muscles here. And then you have other ones that are really, you could say weak or maybe inhibited in the front of our neck, and then also those upper traps. So you might work on those upper traps, the low traps all day long to try to work them, but if we don't address the lack of mobility here, or maybe the, curvature or kyphotic curvature of our spine, you're probably never going to get them to function very well. And you can kind of feel that through some exercises that we can do together. So can we partner up? Just kind of grab someone next to you. And if you feel comfortable, let's go and stand up. We've been sitting for 33 minutes. So I'm just going to grab right onto underneath his arm, right, kind of pinning that shoulder in. And my other hand's there just for the sake of leverage. And then he'll just open up. So I'm just trying to prevent his shoulder blade from moving. And so you can kind of play with that one. And so our shoulders, I think, are arguably one of the most complex joints, or the whole shoulders, head, neck, rib cage, chest, all this kind of integration of movement, right? Whereas our knees, although there's, of course some coordination along with your ankles and your hips, but our knees really just bend and flex, right? They just kind of come here. Our arms, of course, our shoulder blades can elevate and depress. They can flare outward and back inward. They protract and retract. But on top of that, we also have this dangly arm that coordinates all the movements around it. And so as you notice when we pinned that shoulder blade underneath with your partner, and then you try to raise up, we can only go, in a very limited range until that scapula really needs to have that function to be able to flare outwards so we can get that forward movement. And same thing when we come forward, our shoulder blade has to depress, slide down that rib cage for us to get that full reach. But as we talked about with our environment, right, of always kind of being in front of us, our body is so inclined to be kind of in this working position. And so those traps and levator scapula kind of drive those shoulder blades up, and then our chest muscles, those pec minor, pec major, just roll those shoulders back in and again pin them in that situation. So then when we try to come overhead, you really can't do it. Just as that same way we felt when we were ourselves kind of pinning that tissue in a much stronger level for some of us. So the exercises that I gave you on here, there's kind of a level 1, level 2, and I'll demonstrate a few extra exercises as well. But these are ones that I think a lot of us on some level should be moderately comfortable with. And I'm going to start at the bottom on this one. Because before you can really start strengthening those inhibited muscles, we should really start stretching out those muscles that are really short and tight. Otherwise you can't really do it very well. Those muscles won't really fire and do their job. So the first one is pretty common. It's that doorway stretch, but I like to add a little variation. So of course you can always come here on any doorway that you have and just kind of bring that chest forward, squeezing those shoulder blades together to whatever range that you have, and we're just feeling that stretch here. So this is fine, but to get a little bit more active, so I need a little more communication to that central nervous system about how to actually train these muscles well, is we get into that position where we start feeling that stretch, but not so much that I can't peel my shoulder blades together and start bringing myself away from that wall. And then you can start coming up overhead and right back down in a very extended range. So I'm still feeling that stretch here, but I'm also feeling a lot of strength down here, which is again what we need to get those shoulders to open up and to start retracting and depressing. So you can start with that one, and then we'll go up one exercise here. So we have a cat-cow type position. We've probably seen this one done many, many times, especially if you've never done any yoga. But the typical is kind of that inhale up and then exhale coming back down. But for many of us, we can probably do this position all day long in our lower back because we're naturally inclined to kind of sit in that position. And typically we can come here all day long in that upper back because that's where we tend to relax in that position. So we want to kind of work the antithesis to that. So you might just take that little inhale to really work on tucking the hips and trying to get some extension here in that low back, or flexion rather. And then you're going to exhale here, squeezing those shoulder blades together, driving them down towards the hips, and then just slightly elevating that head and neck. So you're just going here to tuck, and then here to drive those shoulder blades back in place. To graduate this exercise to also kind of help retract that head and neck and chin is if you were to do a wall lean. So I'll just use it right here. If my head were just to rest on the wall, my hips tucked, shoulder blades tucked down and back, hands open, especially if you go kind of those pinkies forward, it'll help get that external rotation of the humerus, and then your shoulders will slide back. But you could hold here for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. If you have a lot of issues or pain here and you're not really used to that exercise, you might just come here. But if you come forward, you can get a little bit more. So we're stretching out those deep occipital muscles here, those ones that are short and tight. But if I peel myself off this wall, which we should actually do this one, should we all find a little wall space and try that one? Just one flat, solid wall. And you could do just a little squat, enough so you can kind of get your hips set and nice and soft in that low back. And then I'm going to take a big inhale, tucking my hips, squeezing my butt, inhaling through that rib cage, and I'll reach up as high as I can to touch. So I'm not folding or extending in my lower back. I'm really reaching for that height and trying to get that extension in that thoracic upper, mid to upper spine before I reach back. And you'll just kind of allow your head and neck to passively follow that rib cage, because we're so directed at trying to control all of our movements with this head position. We really want it to come from that rib cage position, just to allow that head and neck to passively follow those motions, because all of our muscles up here are really tiny, really intrinsic. They're not really meant for big forceful movements, but all these muscles down here are very supportive. So if we can initiate all that movement from here, it makes it much easier to allow that head and neck to passively follow. So a nice inhale up, big touch, and then you can relax back down. To graduate this exercise, what would be kind of your level 2 exercise is if you're to lay down, and this is almost...
You've got it great under your knees, you know that, right?
Yeah, that's okay. We'll build those
You want a yoga?
calluses. So very similar to what Sarah had demonstrated, where she was talking about doing this one, which is awesome. Your first one might be simply to kind of assist with your hands. So if you're to start almost like you're going to do a push-up, where we're going to draw those elbows down and back, kind of pushing them towards my rib cage, and then you can assist yourself coming up. So right here, I'm already having gravity prevent me, or gravity's pulling me here, but those muscles in the back of my neck are trying to retract back, so I'm getting the correction at the neck that we need, and then with that flexion, or extension at the spine, sorry, we're also getting that extension that we need. So your exercise, if you wanted to graduate more, is if you were to go hands back behind you, and then you took that inhale up, extending back, reaching those fingertips down towards my heels while I rotate my thumbs to the ceiling and come back down. Inhale up, extend back, and retract back down. So we can do those exercises, 2-3 times a day, but if you're spending 10 minutes maybe doing these exercises, but 12 hours here, right, there's probably not going to play a huge benefit. They're going to help. They're certainly better than not doing anything. But your first key thing is to really start changing our environment so that SAID principle becomes something very different than this position. Excuse me. So when you're seated, like you're seated now, making sure are your hip flexors to some extent active, your butt firing, your rib cage up, sitting tall and confident. When you walk, are you doing that same thing? You can even slightly rotate your thumbs outward just to retract the shoulder blades when you walk. So kind of taking all those little notes of things that you do all day long and start making those little minor corrections are really going to make that lasting payoff.